Welcome back to Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers, a podcast devoted to exploring the frontiers of psychedelic medicine and what it takes to cultivate a healthy body, mind, and spirit. I'm Reid Robison, psychiatrist and principal investigator of the psychedelic studies at Numinus. My co-host, Dr. Steve Thayer, a psychologist and lead trainer for Numinus psychedelic therapy training programs. Steve wasn't here for this interview because he was off modeling good self-care and taking a vacation. And speaking of training, Numinus Training has an upcoming course this July on psychedelic harm reduction and integration, a course I'd highly recommend as an intro to get an overview of how to begin supporting clients in psychedelic sessions and helping them integrate. It's only 10 hours long, I say only, and you get great content and opportunities to discuss what people are doing in different settings in this space. I also love the group and cohort approach where you really build good connections with your classmates, peers, teammates who are looking to do the same thing perhaps. So check out numinus.com/training for more info on this. And today's conversation is with Austin Mao. And Austin is what I'd call an entrepreneur for social good. He is co-founder of Ceremonia, a nonprofit sanctuary near Denver, where he facilitates deep transformative experiences with psilocybin and ayahuasca. I met Austin 2 or 3 years ago at a Masters of Scale Summit put on by Reid Hoffman and June and Darren Triff. And I remember meeting Austin, and every time he'd share something, didn't matter what setting we were in, I was like, wow, that was deep. And so I was excited for this opportunity to have a conversation with Austin that I can share with you all. So without further ado, please enjoy. Hello and welcome back to Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers. I'm Reid Robison and excited to be here with my friend Austin Mao. Austin, how you doing?
Hi, Reid. So good to see you again.
Likewise. So, Austin, for our listeners, could you introduce yourself and perhaps share a bit about the work you're doing that I find very fascinating?
Absolutely. I'm the co-founder of Ceremonia, a legal and nonprofit psychedelic sanctuary near Denver, Colorado. We're a church that serves psilocybin and ayahuasca to help our retreat participants connect deeper with their own spirituality and awaken together.
Very cool. Very cool. So this is group work, I imagine.
Yes, group work.
Awesome. Well, that's one of the things I love to talk about, as some of our listeners will know. But perhaps you could share a bit more about what it's like to take part in a Ceremonia retreat. Like, what's the container like, the setting? When does it all begin, and what happens next?
Yes, at Ceremonia, we ask the question, what's the difference between a trip and a transformation? When I've polled people in the room when I speak, quite a few of people have tried psychedelics recreationally, right? And then when I poll how many have tried it therapeutically or ceremonially, that number shrinks quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And the difference with group work is that when we're in a container together, we explore connection. We don't live on an island, right? When after a psychedelic experience, we go home to our family, to our friends, to our workplace, and meet each other. And so as we build connection with each other, we're practicing the skills of connecting back in the real world. And the way that I think about this process is content versus process, right? Like when you go into therapy or when you go into a psychedelic experience, the content, the stories, the emotions, the beliefs that come up and arise, those are very important. But the process in which you meet yourself, you meet that content, is something that you are going to take home and integrate, right? And so to that end, we support people in developing their skills and their capacity. The skills, which come from meditation, mindfulness practices, connection practices, and psychotherapeutic practices, that then you try on, and the more that you practice it in our container, the more capacity you grow to hold more challenging experiences.
You mentioned something about content and process. I've been thinking a lot about this lately because I believe it was Yalom who said something about, process over content. Process, like you mentioned, being the how or why, whereas content is the what or when. But I like what you said, if I'm understanding it right, is viewing both as important, right? Of course, it matters what comes up and we make meaning, but a big part of the equation is what we do with all that. Is that what you mean in the process versus content comment?
Yes. And when we learn the processes, we're able to develop our capacity to hold more content. And so what we find is by people learning mindfulness, by people learning psychotherapeutic tools and facilitating it for themselves and for each other, they're able to go deeper with less medicine, and with more medicine, be able to handle more medicine without it going into a bad trip or mystical territories that are challenging to integrate, right?
Yeah, I like this, and maybe we can go on a slight tangent from here because it's an area I find fascinating. I get asked about a lot. Is how does one develop the capacity to hold more and more? How do you learn to navigate the psychedelic experience, like as a separate way of looking at it in maybe the microcosm, or like Ram Dass asks in his poetic words, can you hold it all, with this smile of unbearable compassion? And what you mentioned of focusing on the process practices, if you will, gives you the capacity to hold more and more, which I'm just highlighting that because I think it strikes me as profound or something useful. But how do you view this journey of being able to hold more and more? What is that? Can you expand on that a bit?
Sure. I'd like to start with two analogies to kind of demonstrate the contrast, right? So let's say you're going to go play music. What would it be like if you entered a room of musicians that you had never interacted with, and then 2 hours later, we're supposed to play a set together? Versus, what would it be like if you were with a group of musicians that you have been playing with for years, and 2 hours later, you went into a session with, right?
Like
The
the
difference
Beatles.
would be like the Beatles, exactly. So in most cases with, let's say, group work and group ceremony, you come in, you shake hands with a group of strangers, 2 hours later, you're tripping together. There's only a certain amount of safety that one can feel in that environment, right? It's a new place, it's a new facilitator, for many people, a new medicine, and a new group of people. The setting has a limitation, right? So what it's like, what our participants often liken their experience here with, is that it's almost as if you did a meditation retreat with your best friends, and then you sat in ceremony. And what's possible is you're able to go so much deeper. To that end, there are three pillars that we have kind of distilled down as the most important ingredients to create that group field: mindfulness, connection, and self-empowerment, right? Mindfulness, you can only consciously change what you're aware of. And the way that I think of mindfulness is it's two escalating factors. The first is awareness, like, what am I experiencing right now, right? And the second is attention. Attention is, how do I hold my attention on what I'm experiencing, particularly when it's challenging, right? So as a practice, we do a lot of somatic work, a lot of somatic experiencing. We help people start with holding attention on what does it feel like in your body to feel love. I mean, everyone wants to feel love, right? And so we bring forth a memory, in a meditation, a memory of someone that you deeply love, or someone or something. It could be a pet, it could be a person, it could be a tree, and feel that in your body, right? And then go deeper into the inner sensation of that, while letting go of the image, of the label, of the beliefs, or even of the attraction of what it feels like to feel that thing. So that's the mindfulness component. And then connection is where we start using the tools of circling. Have you ever done circling? Heard of that?
No, I don't think so.
Circling was born out of Gestalt therapy and is often related to as a group meditation on the present moment. And it really supports people in developing the skills of curiosity and compassion. Do you want to try it on?
Yeah, I'd love to.
So it often begins with the question, what's it like to be you right now? So Reid, in this present moment, what's it like to be you?
And just for a little more instructions, this may be breaking the rules already, but am I focusing on feelings or just anything goes, free associate?
You can free associate, but ultimately, where we go into is more about feelings and the present moment, like sensory experience.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, in this moment, I feel calm. I feel curious. I notice my mind wandering, like you mentioned, where love is felt in the body, and that just struck a certain chord in my memory banks, and I find myself trying to gently rein in my brain from thinking about a cool study I saw out of Finland where it showed different types of love in different parts of the body. And anyway, that's a mental peek at what it's like to be me. But and overall, I feel like a kind of a spring energy these days. This is looking at more of a big picture, like in this moment, and for a number of days now, feeling energized and a bit more of a bounce in my step. I don't know, how am I doing so far at circling, Austin?
So calm, curiosity, some wandering thoughts, and a spring energy. And I'm curious, what's it like to hold the calm and like the spring energy at the same time?
Yeah, that is a good question. Because that calm feels bigger. Well, the calm and spring energy, um, the image that comes to mind that I think was a seed planted from a book I read long ago, is the image of a supple leopard, like ready to pounce, but walking lightly through the world, ready to spring into action, if you will, but still calm and collected. That's what it feels like. But holding the calm and the mental wandering is also an interesting experience, because it makes me feel like the calm is bigger. The calm is what can hold this with a big hug, if you will, of like my funny wandering mind. That's happening, but the calm is behind it, it seems like.
A supple leopard and a big hug. I have this visual in my mind, and I feel this like exuberance that rises inside of me. And I'm just wondering what's it like to share this in this moment.
It's fun. It's been an intention of mine. This whole podcast journey, we've been at it for a few years now, me and Steve, on this Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers podcast. And, it's a journey of, I think, getting to know oneself. And for me, one of the intentions I'm layering onto it is just being more and more vulnerable. And because it's something I want to do, and happen to find joy in, it feels good. It feels fun, joyful.
Yeah, it sounds like you're getting joy from being in your intention of being more vulnerable and feeling yourself more. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. How's it feel for you?
Well, this is circling, right?
Oh,
I asked
cool.
you, what's it like to be you? And effectively, I asked whatever answer you gave, right? It's like, what's that like? Because I can hear from you what it feels like to be you for 1,000 years and still get a fraction of what it's actually like to be you right now. And so by approaching you with deep curiosity of, man, you said calm, but what does calm actually feel like for you? Where do you feel that in your body? And you gave me imagery, and I mean, I feel like in this moment, just so much more connected with you, right? Now imagine an hour of that in a group container, right? Where there's 10 people in a circle, and each person is just like, very curious about exploring these threads. And oftentimes the threads that get explored are around feeling lonely or feeling or like mattering. Do I matter in this world, right? And by approaching each other and ourselves with this curiosity and compassion, we develop that own internal tool. Like, that image of a supple leopard and a big hug, like, what was it like to experience that,
Yeah.
to draw that forward?
And are you wanting me to answer that question or just highlighting it? Yeah. It reminds me of what you said of the depth you can build quickly with this practice. It reminds me, for some reason, of a couple corporate retreats I've been on. Our fearless leader at Numinus is Peyton Nyquist, and I remember going to a retreat in BC of the executives and team leads of Numinus, and it started with this talking stick exercise that I think was 2 or 3 hours long, where everyone just shared, the joys and struggles of their life across the board, personally, professionally, existentially, if you will. And I remember just the palpable feeling of that deepening, and people on the edge of their seats with active, compassionate listening, and as tears are shed in kind of this alternate boardroom model, if you will, it was really fascinating to see the beauty of that and also the utility of that in people we work with and day to day, and might not know what life is like, what it's like to be them.
Yeah, there's, most of the people that you ask, how are you? What's the answer that you typically get back? Fine.
Good. How are you?
Okay. Fine. Yeah. Have you ever been fine one moment in your life? I've been excited, or I've been curious, or I've been sad, or I've been depressed, but what is fine, right? And so first developing that inner awareness allows us to actually open the gateway to curiosity, to like, what is it actually like to be me right now, right?
Yeah, I heard once upon a time that the Persian equivalent of how are you is something more like, how is your heart? And
right.
I like to throw a plot twist in now and then and ask friends how their heart is. It's just fun to see the pause and then what happens next.
Yeah, I like that practice too. It's beautiful. So this practice of connection, what it does is a couple things. Number one, again, you're kind of like going into a psychedelic experience now with people that you feel very close to. Mm-hmm. Within 4 hours in our container, nearly everybody expresses that they feel closer to the group than they do with family and their closest friends. And really the juice of connection, the magic, happens in presence, right? If you actually tune in to your sense of connection, if I started going into story of the past, right, ruminating on the past or projecting into the future, right, all the things I will do, etc., that engages you and me in the mind, right? And when we're in our minds, the sense of like connection is pretty minimal. But when we're here right now together, when I'm feeling myself while feeling you, right, and we're having this reciprocity of that feeling, that's where we can feel so intimate and so deep together. And I think this gets reflected in the psychedelic experience, right? Because in group work, when people are under psychedelics together, we're constantly impacting each other. In this moment, you and I are constantly impacting each other. The eye contact or lack of eye contact, what we're doing, how we're breathing, so on and so forth. There's so much information that we're not consciously aware of. And so in a group retreat setting, our energy that is coming out and the things that we're facing, even though we don't even know the content that someone else might be going through, is actually impacting me, right? And so having that context allows everybody to go that much deeper.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like how you called it earlier the field, or building a group field, like that community that leads to people holding each other. And it makes sense what you mean now. And I think it's beautiful. And it brings me back to that question of, can you hold it all? And one of the things that we want to be holding, and in my opinion, at least what's coming up for me right now is holding, that compassion for self and other, or a group of others at the same time, or everything and everyone and all of life, as we expand that practice. Is that kind of how you see the work?
Yeah. So you're talking about holding it all. And that's where I think about capacity, right? Because one of the greatest fears that people have coming into a psychedelic experience is, am I going to have a bad trip, right? Quote unquote bad trip.
Yeah.
And the way I think of that phenomenon is that's when the content is over the capacity for us to hold, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so by helping us develop the capacity to quote unquote hold it all, we're able to go so much deeper into the experience. And what we believe in as a church, and what I believe in myself, is the deeper that we go into ourselves, the more spirituality that we feel, right? The more inner sense of expansion, of infinity that we're capable of feeling. So that capacity to hold it all is something that we really practice for. Even when I give talks from the stage, I walk people through a process called stretching. And I'll kind of explain it to you here because it's more challenging to facilitate online. Mm-hmm. But imagine that first you close your eyes and you feel your own body, right? You feel yourself, and taking some deep breaths and just tracking like different sensations in your body, tracking your thoughts, tracking your senses. Then you open your eyes and look around the room and just noticing the taste in your mouth. The relationship, what happens when you're in connection with somebody, right? What happens, what do you notice in them? And then stretching is holding all three contexts at the same time. So feeling yourself while feeling the other, while feeling the room. And what happens in that case is everybody begins to feel a hyper sense of presence. Like the mind starts shutting down. And to me, it's the fastest form of a deep meditative state that I've found. You can do this in less than a minute, right?
Yeah,
that
I like it.
Amount of information is always present. I mean, it is an incredible, like infinite amount of information. And yet how few of us are able to capture all of that, right? That's what the psychedelic experience really opens us up into.
And are we talking about equanimity here? And when you're talking about the capacity to hold it, or not being overwhelmed by the content, do you feel like that's developing or strengthening your equanimity capacity?
I believe that equanimity is a prerequisite to developing capacity to hold. Jack Kornfield says that meditation needs to be equal parts awareness and loving kindness, right? Because awareness can be a double-edged sword. If you're aware of something that has led you to feel a lot of guilt, and you're not able to pour compassion into that part of you, then you can feel that guilt in so much more than you have before, right?
Yeah, and I agree. And I know this is a bit semantics, but But equanimity is another topic of great interest these days, these years, if you will. And I do often get asked about, what does it mean? What's its role and how to cultivate it? But and which is one of the reasons I'm weaving it in, and how it relates to that very common question I get all the time of oh, am I going to have a bad trip going into my first experience with ayahuasca, or my first psychedelic experience, or my 10th, whatever it may be. And I'm thinking of, who is it? Shinzen Young in Science of Enlightenment talks about this three-legged stool of mindfulness with the awareness and the attentional training, but then equanimity. If you don't have that, it's kind of like you said about the double-edged sword of awareness. If you're aware of something and you hone your attention to it, and you don't have the capacity to hold it, you're overwhelmed, system overload.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how do you help people with that? I assume a good percentage of people you see in retreat have not had past experience, especially in ceremony, right? How do you help build this capacity? Is it through the circling, stretching, the group connection, all that and more, I assume?
Yeah. So, the vast majority of people that come here have never had a psychedelic experience, and certainly not an intentional one. But we also get leading therapists, leading psychedelic facilitators, et cetera. For example, one of our testimonials is from somebody who has been in the field of psychedelics for 52 years and trained thousands of trauma therapists, been a trauma therapist for 30 years. She's actually upstairs right now, one of our co-facilitators. And so we have such a wide variety of people. And what's so interesting about that is we've developed a model that is a one-size-fits-all and seems to produce predictable outcomes, which is kind of wild, because the cohorts and the variety of people that we get in are so different, right? And after each ceremony, we do 3 ceremonies in 5 days. The outcomes are pretty predictable after each one. And the way that protocol works is it's all about emergent workshops. So let me explain what that means. Mm-hmm. Have you ever done any men's work, Reid?
Did you say men's work?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's especially important these days.
Mm-hmm. So I've been in men's work containers where they're like, okay, we're going to stand in a circle and we're going to feel anger now, everybody, right? I remember that was the first time that I got into contact with my anger. And I remember at that moment, it was really cathartic because we were all screaming together, bonding, etc. But I also noticed that there was a hesitation in me to do that, right? There was a part of me that said, hey, I'm actually not feeling angry right now. I'm performing in a way and drawing that out of me, right? In contrast to emergent work, which is wherever you are feeling right now, we're going to support you in becoming aware of that and feeling that more, right? And helping you meet that with loving kindness through the 8 C's of self in IFS, mm-hmm. Curiosity, compassion, courage, primarily, right? So circling is a great example of that. The first question I asked you, what's it like to be you right now? You could have given any answer. And we just went into exploring what's that like? Is there anything else, mm-hmm. reflecting back to you what that was. So by using practical meditation tools to help people develop awareness, and then going into workshops that facilitate emergence, right? Being deeper in what is, it creates not only surfacing the unconscious to the conscious, like that faculty, but it also helps develop the skill of meeting ourselves of oh, what am I feeling right now? Approaching that with curiosity, with compassion, with calm, with courage, etc. In the psychedelic experience, people then practice this, right? So we're engaging in ceremony, playing live music, people are hearing live music, etc. And let's say drums come in, right? And drums you've sat in ayahuasca ceremonies, they tend to stir up energy, or they can stir up energy, right? And so when people have this bat belt of tools of meeting themselves, they could be like, oh, what is this that I'm feeling here? There's a tension in my body. How do I probe this tension to see, like, with curiosity, what's it trying to teach me? And how do I pour compassion, like love from my heart, into this place that holds tension? Where's that coming from? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm smiling because I'm just remembering a moment in an ayahuasca ceremony setting where, as soon as the drum started, I felt this like very significant wave of nausea and energy moving towards purging, like almost the early warning signs of needing to throw up. And I personally have a lot of resistance towards for purging through vomiting. It's a funny thing that I get to work on in ayahuasca settings and when working with things like Cambo or whatever. But yeah, the drums have been a big part of the experience in many different ways, that included.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always enjoy playing drums in ceremony.
Yeah. I had this yoga teacher once who I just loved. His name was Yoshi, and he had spent years in the mountains before ending up in New York in this yoga training I was in years ago, and years in the mountains in South Central America drumming, sacred drumming he called it, and it just intrigued me, something about drumming and what he plugged into then really played into how profound of a human he felt as he showed up as a yoga teacher. It was just as an aside.
That's the really cool thing about shamanic ceremonies that I think is really missing in the psychedelic therapy practice, right? This it's almost like people that come through our container, they're like, I didn't know it was going to be a concert, But it's so much more than that. There's a channeling of energy from the facilitators, right, to the group field. And I liken it to being like a shamanic DJ, right? A good DJ, if you've ever gone to, let's say, an EDM concert or a club, a good DJ isn't 10 steps ahead of the crowd, right? They're building things up, and then there's a drop, right? They're one step ahead of the crowd, right? And in the case of being a shamanic DJ, if you're 10 steps ahead playing like really vibrant, joyous music, that can lead people to bypass because they're, at that moment, they, just like the analogy with the men's work, at that moment, they could be feeling grief or guilt or shame. And if I am like strumming the guitar and singing a beautiful, joyous song, in the person's mind, they might say, oh, I shouldn't be feeling grief right now. I should be feeling joy.
Yeah.
And then that gets ground into the system and then integrated back in life and creates suffering through the ignorance of, the subconscious ignorance of what we're actually feeling right now.
Yeah, it's a good point about the bypassing. So I want to circle back to one thing you mentioned about readiness for a ceremony, because, like I said, this is a frequent question: is how do you help people know if they're ready for this kind of thing? Like, or do you view it as, people, if they hear the call and show up, work can be done in preparation on an individual basis to help get someone ready. And I guess for context, when we were all at the MAPS conference in Denver, I know we were talking earlier of running into each other there. Last year, I was in this panel by Yaden and colleagues on difficult experiences, and someone said in a talk, ask yourself this beforehand: are you ready to let yourself fall apart? If no, then you're not ready for a psychedelic experience. And I've just sat with that question and wondering what your thoughts are on the topic.
Yeah, hearing that's a very interesting uh, prompt that person or perspective that person gave, because I don't think
Yeah,
anybody is ever ready to allow themselves to fall apart, right? I
yeah,
don't know about
like
you, but
fully.
right. I don't know about you, but when before I sit with plant medicine, I always have some level of fear or anxiety in my system. And
Mhm.
I'm, hundreds of experiences in. And so, part of me wants to say, no one is ever fully ready.
Mhm.
This is making a leap, right? And it's because, Buddha says that the source of all fear is the fear of uncertainty. And the greatest
Yeah.
uncertain thing is what's after death, right? Death being the most uncertain thing. And there is um, almost nothing as uncertain. Um, let me get out of the double negative. The psychedelic experience is maybe the most uncertain thing that somebody can approach, because who knows what the medicine can show you, particularly for people that have never used a psychedelic, right? And
Yeah.
so readiness, I think, requires us to be able to embrace the uncertain, which requires a certain level of courage, right? Now, I was on a podcast with Third Wave where I was asked this question, like, who's this for, who's this not for? And I would say that courage, curiosity, compassion, those can be trained for. That's something that we've discovered here in this work, right? You can train for those qualities, and therefore make a psych accessible, right? So, so is there a prerequisite for a person to be able to jump immediately into a psychedelic? Please do yourself a favor and engage in the skills and practice those skills so that your experience can be more powerful, more grounded, more safe for you.
Mhm. So the prerequisites are curiosity and working towards some courage for the leap, perhaps.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard you say once upon a time something like when we were talking about a felt sense of safety, you said something like it's more important than tolerance, safety. Um, I'm wondering if you remember that, if that sounds like something you'd say and what you mean by it. It just stuck with me.
I don't remember saying safety is more important than tolerance, but safety is, I give talks on this. Safety is what all life seeks. The original emotional psychologist Plechik, who created that emotional wheel that's on a magnet on my
Hmm.
refrigerator right now, said that love is equal to safety plus joy. Right? Like, in other words, in order for you to feel love, you've got to feel safe to feel it, to feel joy. All of life seeks to create life, and the only way that life can create life is when it's feeling safe. Right? So um, this term set and setting really maps to the inner sense of safety and the outer sense of safety, right? Setting
Hmm.
is how safe do I feel in this space with these facilitators, with these people, with this medicine, etc. Right? Mindset is how safe do I feel with my own thoughts, my own feelings, my own self, right?
Hmm.
And developing the skills to, um, the skills of self empowerment through mindfulness and psychotherapeutic tools, that helps develop your inner sense of safety. And then connection, which is our second pillar, like through these practices of emergent workshops and circling, etc., that helps develop the outer sense of safety.
Yeah.
When you feel more safe, you're able to go deeper and able to hold more with greater equanimity.
Yeah. I like it. That makes sense. Well, cool. And you mentioned something else that piqued my interest, just to touch on it before we forge ahead beyond the preparation. But you mentioned AI-based preparation tool. And I'm wondering if you can share a bit about that, because I think many share this question that I have, and curiosity about the world we live in and the rapid rise of AI, and what are its uses, potential uses, and potential pitfalls even in mental health and psychedelic transformation. It seems like you may have landed on a use case that sounds like it could be pretty helpful.
Sure. I'll share with you by way of story, and then give you kind of like how we use it. I've been recording my integration sessions using a tool called otter.ai, which I highly recommend, which is a voice transcription tool. And so about 5 minutes of a share, 3 ceremonies, that's, 3 shares, or 15 minutes of voice transcription. I'm, of course, in a retreat at least once a month here in Ceremonia. So, just over the course of the last year, I don't know how many that amounts to, but hours of transcribed content for my shares. I then upload this into a custom GPT on ChatGPT. And what I'm able to do is, my wife and I are when we have arguments, we actually say, hey, pause, can we record this? We record our argument on Otter. We then later send that recording through our both of our various GPTs, our AI chatbots, and ask it for advice from our highest self. And what and I ask the question, like, how can I take responsibility? Right? That's a prompt that I give my AI chatbot, which is a mirrored version of me when I'm in the deepest part of my truth. Right? What I've gotten back from it has been so helpful for me to provide me insights from a level of objectivity and compassion, because I've told that AI chatbot to role play as Dr. Dick Schwartz, from the founder of Internal Family Systems, and I've had it in the past also role play as Ram Dass and give me advice, from myself.
That's cool.
From my highest self. Yeah.
And did you train this GPT of your higher self, if you will, by feeding it your integration shares? Was that would that be what it takes to train it if someone wanted to try this?
Right. So everyone has a unique profile. And so this example that I gave you, we're doing for all of our participants too, right? So in preparation, people start engaging with an AI chatbot that asks them questions. And those, the questions, for example, could be like, role play as Tony Robbins and help me analyze Tony has this methodology of the wheel of life, my health, my finances, my impact, my mental, my relationships, so on and so forth. And people can then interact with the AI chatbot that starts to learn about them and who they are, right? On the integration side, same thing, except now our participants have this information of, again, their truest self. They're sharing revelations about themselves in the integration sessions that they couldn't have even fathomed before. And so taking this snapshot and going back into life and being able to interact with something that's able to speak back to you the highest truth of yourself, I mean, that's extraordinarily valuable, right?
It's also extraordinarily fascinating to think about storing a copy of our higher self in ChatGPT, if you will, and being able to query it. It's intriguing. Do people use it through integration and have access to it beyond that for ways like you mentioned, recording a disagreement with your significant other, or finding a recalibration a year later, perhaps?
We provide the tools, the online courses, and the protocols for people to do it. Of course, their mileage will vary based on how much they use it, right?
Yeah.
Because we work with people that from the ages, our youngest participant is 23, our oldest is 78. So it just depends on how much they use that. But the value of it is, I was sitting with Rick Doblin, who was a very early advisor to us, and we were talking about how do we scale psychedelic access? How do we scale psychedelic healthcare? And the model that I believe Ceremonia is pioneering in a way is this intersection of technology and community, right? Mm-hmm. So in our integration program, as a church, we gather every Sunday online and in person here in our center, and we do circling every week. And we usually have 20 to 30 people right now out of our 170 alumni that gather for that. And then the technology component is what we're talking about here. Like this AI chatbot is not going to be perfect. By the way, they're going to get better and better. I don't know if you've seen the recent OpenAI demonstration that was really like the movie Her, But in this current moment, it is so much better than having nothing or than having a book that you can't interact with, right? And so it creates a more scalable and sustainable model for our field. I know a lot of your listeners are therapists and people that work in this field. It creates a model that helps us replicate ourselves more and provide a high standard of care for the people that come through our container.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of all these potential uses because, the way I view some of this work personally is, there are moments of a given day or week where I feel like, my 8Cs are more on board than other moments, of course, or I'm more in my higher self. And when triggered, flustered, and at risk for responding from one of my, hurt parts or not my, capital S self, if you will, I look for ways, I look for efficient ways of getting myself back into the driver's seat of my capital S self. And I just like this idea as one of those ways, like you mentioned, role playing with Ram Dass. That might be even more useful than just turning on a favorite Ram Dass quote, or can see how more useful it'd be to have the Tony Robbins Wheel of Life role played out in dialogue rather than just reading it in a book or listening to it on Audible while you drive.
If you want to try something really wild, ChatGPT has a iOS and Android app where you can have a conversation with it now. It's not yet the level that they demonstrated with the version to be released. But you can ask it, you can prompt it and ask it for a custom meditation for you. So you could say, hey, I'm going through these things right now, and I'm having these relationship challenges and having these distractions and so on and so forth. Role play as Ram Dass and just guide me through a meditation and give yourself slow pauses and prompt me to breathe or something like that. And then just let it guide you through a meditation. I mean, imagine this guiding, like Ram Dass guiding you through a meditation. I mean, the potential is extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I used to worry more about who's shaping us, who's shaping our future selves. Is it us or the robots? And I used to worry because as malleable beings, we are the sum total of what we repeatedly do and consume and our patterns. And but this example and so many others, I think, puts that fear at ease a little bit, because you're just asking it to do the legwork of from all the Ram Dass content you've assimilated, piece it together in a meditation for me, because I know Ram Dass has been useful for me in times of need like this, for example. But do you worry about the unknowns of AI while we're on the topic, or any thoughts? Because I know this is an area you have some expertise in. Thoughts on how to navigate this world ethically and with integrity.
Yeah, first I'd say make sure you say please and thank you when you interact with ChatGPT, so that when the AI overlords take over, you're last in line to be enslaved. Just kidding.
I do. People sometimes poke fun at me. I don't know if it's kids or friends when I'll screenshot like a prompt. I use these please and thank you things in it, and people get a
That's
kick out
so
of that.
great.
But I don't know why I do it. But maybe it's subconsciously out of fear of the overlords.
I love that for you. Well, AI is here, right? And it's developing at a pace that even the developers don't fully understand. So we're at an inflection point in humanity, and at a woo-woo spiritual lens, I don't think it is a coincidence that this is happening at the same time as the rise of intentional use of psychedelics and all the psychedelic research. I believe that humanity is being called forth into a greater level of beingness and creativity, right? Because I think the estimate is by 2035, all human jobs will be automated. And so what is humanity to do, right? What are we going to do when we don't have to schedule something, when we don't have to make this call, when we don't have to do sales, when we don't have to do marketing? What are we to do, right? And the answer, I think, is creativity. You just talked about the 8 C's. Creativity is one of the 8 C's. But I think that, this is my opinion, there is an escalation of how people go through those C's, right? At least in the psychedelic experience. And what I mean by that is it's very challenging to be in your creative spirit when you're burdened by so many parts, when you're blended with so many parts, right? It's very challenging to feel inspired when you don't feel safe. And so the final workshop, kind of giving it away, but the final workshop after our 3rd day ceremony is creativity. We create music together, we paint, we make poetry together. And what people are able to create is like wondrous, beautiful things that they've never thought they could do before. So many people have bought hand pans after that workshop. I bring this up because as AI develops, it's going to free us up into being able to be more creative, because the laborious mental task is going to be offloaded, right? Now, that's of course going to boil down to choice. Not everyone's not suddenly going to become Mozart. Some people are going to choose to suffer quite a bit from that. But it's also an opportunity, right? And the opportunity here is that if we can get a leg up, particularly in our field, right? I think in the next few years, it takes a lot of energy to hold space in a psychedelic container, particularly group containers, right? We're going to need tools ourselves to recuperate and to support us in that sense of burnout, AI being one of them.
Yeah. I'm thinking of this book. Have you ever read Glass Bead Game by Hermann Hesse?
Mm-mm.
It's just he won the Nobel Prize long ago. I believe it was for that book, but he wrote Siddhartha, which was really profound for me on my journey. But that book is kind of having some new meaning hearing you talk about this, because it's about this kind of fictional utopian society where people are freed to contemplate art and culture. Like it has some other societal issues because these are the intellectual elite, but this glass bead game combines math, music, art, philosophy to establish this inner harmony, like this harmonious inner cosmos, if you will. And talking about AI and consciousness rising at the same time just reminded me of that book.
I think that's where we're at right now. Yeah. Now, all the more reason why it's so important. This work is so important to hold this work with integrity and quality, as well as to, I think, develop protocols that are replicable. I think one of the issues in our field is that You hold space in containers, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So in that case, you're the product, right? Like the way that you do your magic has an impact on people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's so challenging to replicate you,
Yeah.
right? And so developing protocols that are replicable, I think, is a core need of this industry to be scalable, so that we can have a lower cost and accessible price point for people that produces a very high standard of care.
Yeah, I agree. That's a big mission of mine, has been along the way, is why when we set up these clinics that are now Numinus here in Utah, why they were taking insurance and why we kept our, ketamine therapy price points as low as possible, because so many people are suffering, and the help that is out there is so inaccessible to so many people, including especially those who need it. But so, yeah, I love what you're saying. And maybe, I know we don't have infinite time, sadly, and you have a retreat to get to. Maybe you could walk through a bit more of your protocol just to get the big picture of what happens in these retreats. Like you mentioned, three medicine sessions through the course of a typical retreat. Is that right?
Yes. So 5-day, 5-night retreat. I shared sort of some of the first day, which is beginning with mindfulness practices. Our very first workshop, for example, is the Buddhist practice of noting, where we're eye gazing with the partner, and you can say one of four things: I'm thinking, I'm feeling, I'm sensing, or I left. And that just helps develop the very basic sense of awareness of what am I experiencing, right? Then it goes into attention, which is being with a somatic experience. I shared with what's it like to be with inner sensation of love, and then we graduate into the inner sensation of annoyance, right? Someone just cut you off in traffic, or someone missed a deadline, and then the inner sensation of hurt, right? So like graduating in the complexity and the challenge of being able to allow for an experience and noticing how the mind tries to distract from feeling it. Then into connection exercises, building up to what we kind of did briefly, which is circling, right? The final workshop before we take a break and then do ceremony is a cold plunge. And we have these cold plunges where you go in as pairs, eye gazing and doing a practice, a presencing practice together. And I believe that the cold plunge is one of the best tools available to us as practitioners to train people into meeting uncomfortable experiences. So we have people share their awareness of what are their expectations, what's it feel like in their body, so on and so forth. And as they're going in their cold plunge, tracking their fight, flight, or freeze mechanism, right? Afterwards, everyone's celebratory, etc., steam room, hot tub, and then we take a break and then ceremony.
Yeah, that's so cool. How cold are we talking about here? As a cold plunger myself, I'm interested.
Well, right now it's summer, but Colorado winters, we're breaking the ice with shovels. So,
you're going into the river or lake then, huh?
No, it's we have cold plunges here on our farm.
Yeah.
And then the other cool thing that we do is, I'm Chinese and my wife is Chinese. In ceremony, we sing Chinese, and I sing songs in Hebrew. We have Arabic. We have lots of different cultures that are represented. And then in the way that we hold integration is we read the Tao Te Ching, the Tao, and we hold integration around a Chinese tea ceremony. And we have tea from various different countries, Vietnam, Turkey, China, that we've brought back from those countries. And then each day, up in the connection, the final workshops before our final ceremony are around giving and receiving. Whenever I've pulled people on who here is a giver, most people thinks of themselves as a giver. Most people raise their hands. Who here has trouble asking for help? Most people raise their hands. And so supporting people into the awareness and the curiosity of what would it be like to receive? What would it be like to just allow myself to feel supported? And then that, before going into the final ceremony, usually opens up such a deep level of spiritual connection because they're just feeling more open and safe to receive. Yeah.
I like that. So to recap, is there a theme of the work on dosing day 1, 2, 3? Like, are you focusing on mind, body, spirit kinds of things, or how do you guide people through the journey through the whole retreat experience?
We used to have it framed as mind, body, spirit. We no longer have themes for the days. If we were to give it a theme, it would probably be, awareness, connection, and receiving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And afterwards, integration happens in a circle over tea with people sharing. Is that?
Yes. So circling
a
happens
debrief?
online and in person. So the retreat concludes on a Sunday for a 5-day retreat, and the participants who just finished the retreat begin with a potluck with the community members. So our community, dozens of people come and we have the potluck together and introduce everybody. And then our alumni,
Cool.
who some of are 2 years ago, right, was their journey, share what their integration was like. So they're hearing live from alumni their experience and tips. Usually the top tip is stay connected, right? Like stay in community. And that goes in perpetuity. We used to have an integration program that was 5 weeks. We would do Zoom calls, et cetera. But what I would observe is that a percentage of people would attend the Zoom calls. Sometimes it's just scheduling, right? But then there would be a drop off. And then the calls would end and then the communal feel would dissipate over time, right? Now with this model, we have it in perpetuity. And in that regard, it really feels like a church. So many people here share like, this is what church should be. Like not a sermon from a mount, not someone preaching at you, but rather like here we are in a circle connected with each other, sharing what it's like to be us right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that, staying connected, because I've, thinking back at all of these profound experiences, even one retreat where afterwards, this wasn't part of the programming, but we all ended up cold plunging in a lake together, arm in arm, with a big group of like 10 or 20 people. It was just someone's idea, and it was so memorable. But there hasn't been that container of keeping in touch unless you had enough extroversion and courage to get each other's numbers and keep in touch, or you had someone organizing it. But we do encourage people, like in the work I do, is to, after an experience like this, to build a castle around it, or like Steve might say, lay down some breadcrumbs so you can find your way back. And it seems to me like having an active, vibrant community connection is one strong path back to this spiritual transformation as it starts to maybe slip away. But is that one of the benefits you see coming of it?
Totally, 100%. And it kind of speaks to the sustainability and scalability model, right? Like you've probably facilitated, I don't know, dozens, maybe hundreds of people now. For you to continue to be in connection with them as a facilitator, impossible, right? That would be many, many full-time jobs. And so by developing a peer support model and a community thread, like people are able to continue awakening together.
Yeah, it's something I've looked at with curiosity in Alcoholics Anonymous as a totally different example, but look at how alive and helpful that is, and sustainable that is, right? And because of I think what you're describing.
Yep. Aho.
Yeah, very cool. Well, is there anything else about Ceremonia that you'd like to share about the work you do, or Anything else top of mind and heart for you?
Yeah, I'd like to share the orientation towards spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
It's encoded into our church's beliefs that when we let go of our protective layers, we naturally open up into the truth of ourselves, to feel that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that feels like joy, gratitude, love, connection. And so when people come in here, they're like, some people come in with trauma from having gone to church as a kid. We had a participant from a Pentecostal church, for example.
Yeah.
And what I share is that when we use a word like God, words are frameworks to try to convey ideas. And your idea of God may be very different from my idea of God. And that's what creates separateness, right? But ideas exist to convey feelings. And the feeling, if you've ever felt God or the presence of God, that is something so uniquely yours and so uniquely mine. And yet we can look at each other and say, hey, are you feeling that? Wow, I'm feeling that too, right? And feelings exist to convey energy. And the energy of the word that we call God is one and the same for all. And so we have religious symbols from all the major religions here. And ultimately, our pathway follows the belief that the end point of psychology is the beginning of spirituality. Like, we use psychotherapeutic tools to help us develop awareness and unburden our parts so that we're able to feel ourselves more. And the more that we go into the inner feelings of ourselves with safety, with curiosity, with compassion and courage, the more that we're able to have a spiritual experience. So this is what we really stand for, right? If you come to Ceremonia, you are coming here for a spiritual experience. And I believe that spirituality is what deeply heals, because the therapeutic model can sometimes look like, hey, you're broken, here's the ways to fix you. But the spiritual model is, you're perfect. And all you got to do is just open your heart to feel your perfect imperfection.
Yeah, I love that. I was sitting in one of my kids' school a while back at a spelling bee, and it's been a little while, but this stuck with me because I was working a lot in an eating disorder treatment center then that I'm still affiliated with, and some other parent, someone's mom was asking what I did for work, and we were talking about this center, and she's like, "Oh, I went there years ago," and it turned into a really interesting conversation about what helped her break free of the cycle of disordered eating behavior patterns, and even getting admitted to the center. And she said so clearly, confidently, it was spirituality. It was the spirituality groups. And that's just one example. But when I was working full time at the center, I took over leading the spirituality groups from one of my mentors, Mike Barrett, and it was the most joyful part of my week. And so anyway, I just bring that up because I agree. It's with you completely. It's tricky territory to navigate because of everything that's associated with it and what religions become in the world. But we can't ignore it. We've got to bring it back. It may have been thrown out by Freud or others with the bathwater a bit, but I love what you're saying about the orientation towards spirituality and how you described it. So thank you.
Thank you, Reid. This has been lovely.
Yeah, it has. Well, thanks, Austin. You're one of those souls who, every time I have a conversation, I feel like I come away with a little enriched and a little more enlightened. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Reid. It's been lovely being here. Thank you for the invitation, and excited to have you on our podcast too, Modern Enlightenment.
Yeah, that'll be fun, and good luck with your retreat cohort. I'll be sending you all the good vibes and love I can from here in Utah.
Yeah, and if you want to join us sometime or come look us up, we're at ceremoniacircle.org and at Ceremonia Circle on Instagram.
Excellent.
And YouTube.
Thank you. And I'll encourage our listeners to check it out when I add some show notes and things. So thanks again, Austin. It's been a pleasure. And have a beautiful day.
Thanks, Reid.
Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers is brought to you by Numinus, a mental wellness company committed to tackling the global mental health crisis by delivering best-in-class psychedelic-assisted therapies, contributing to the body of primary and clinical psychedelic research, and fostering healing through community connection and social responsibility. You can learn more about Numinus at numinus.com. That's Numinus.com. If you enjoyed the show today and you want to support us, here's how you do it. Rate and review the show on platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Subscribe to the Numinus YouTube channel, like the videos, and share it. Share the show or clips of the show with someone that you think will enjoy it. The content of this podcast does not constitute medical advice or mental health treatment. Consult with a medical or mental health professional if you believe you are in need of mental health treatment.